right. Well, welcome to this episode of Under the Brim. My name is Dr. Shanna Moody, and I am a professor of kinesiology and human performance here at Sul Ross State University. And at Under the Brim, we like to talk about all things mindset and motivation, about what's going on in the minds of our athletes and what it takes to actually compete at the collegiate level. And we're really focusing on how do rodeo athletes and traditional sports athletes compare or differentiate in their preparation, their training, their competition, and their performance in their sport. And it's been really interesting to bring in some of the athletes from all different areas of competition and have them interact and talk with each other. And most of the athletes didn't know each other. So a lot of the traditional sports rodeo athletes and the rodeo athletes didn't know each other coming in, and they learned a lot from each other. But when we walked in today, I asked if you guys ever interacted, and you said you did. So it's really unique, and nothing against the athletes themselves, but I'm probably the most excited about this conversation today and to get to talk to the two guests that I have with me today. So I'm going to let you take it away and introduce yourselves. So you want to go ahead?
Yep. I'm CJ Aragon. I'm the rodeo coach at Sul Ross State University. This is my 5th year at Sul Ross and 15th year coaching.
Okay. Coaching specifically rodeo or anything else?
Specifically rodeo.
Okay. All right.
I'm Troy Canaba. I'm the head softball coach and head volleyball coach, also assistant athletic director here at Sul Ross State University. I've been here 8 years, and I just started my 22nd year coaching.
Okay.
Every sport. I've been pretty much doing everything. So.
Okay. Always at the collegiate level, or
no, at the high school level. I've only been at the college level for 8 years.
Okay. Okay.
Go to some of these high school gyms around here, and they've got his name up in there where he took teams to the playoffs and the finals and stuff.
Got some banners in some high schools, so it's okay. Yeah.
Yes, that's really neat. So tell me again, how do y'all know each other? How do y'all interact with each other?
We, of course, just being around here at Sul Ross too, but also too, we referee basketball. We used to referee basketball together for a long time, and then interacting just with him because he runs a really good program, and so we sit and watch things and pick brains and all that kind of stuff. But mainly for basketball and just being associated here at Sul Ross.
Okay. So you'll both officiate?
Mm-hmm. Yep, basketball.
At the high school level?
Yes.
Okay, basketball. Male or female?
Both.
Both, okay.
Junior high too, JV. We
wherever they send us. They're pretty short of officials down here.
Yes. Okay. So y'all are both members of the same association?
Yep.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, what's that called?
Permian Basin Basketball Officials Association.
Okay.
PBBOA.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Is that something you've always been involved in?
Yes, I played basketball here at Sul Ross. So then once I got done with my career, I hopped over and started doing officiating basketball just so I could stay around it. And so I've been doing it a long time. And so, yeah, it's been something we've done for a long time.
Okay.
I reffed when I lived in Albuquerque and worked at Super Looper Magazine. I used to ref a lot over there. And then I didn't call any games for 12 years. When I moved down here, Brad Gwatney, who used to work here at the university, said, "Hey, you used to ref basketball games. Why don't you come help us?" And I got started again after taking 12 years off.
You got pulled back in.
Pulled back in.
Yeah.
I enjoy it, though. I really enjoy it.
Okay. So basketball is not the sport that you coach, Coach Canaba. So is it fun to be able to work in a different atmosphere, be in a different sport environment than what you're in on the day-to-day?
Yeah, for sure. And then, I coach girls, and so being and watch the boys play a little bit is a little bit different. But, yeah, I love the sport because that's what I played. It's really weird because my career took a different avenue than what I played. I started coaching girls here at Sul Ross and as a GA, and that's kind of where my career went that way. But it's pretty neat to see the different dynamics of both sports and the sports that we coach, and watching his athletes and our athletes it's just amazing to watch and be part of.
Okay. And then what's that like for you? Because it's basketball, do you feel like it's totally different than rodeo, or you see some similarities, or is it nice to just be away from rodeo for a minute and do something outside the box?
It's kind of just it's kind of a refresher for me. I really like doing it because one of the things I really like to watch is how coaches interact with their players. There's a lot of really good coaches in this area, and there's some that I don't think are living up to their potential just because of the way they interact and the way they treat their players. So for me, it's a really good learning experience on how a lot of these coaches treat their players and stuff, and you get to see it as an official. And you get to watch the students' body language and stuff when the coaches are yelling at them or when the coaches are encouraging them and stuff. And I find that really interesting. And that's probably one of the biggest things I get from officiating is I get to learn from a lot of these coaches indirectly just by watching them.
Yeah, so you're actually using it as almost like a lab or an experiment where you're getting to, yeah. That's really neat. That's fascinating. And that just shows your mindset going in, that this isn't just a side gig. It's not a side hustle. You're not there just for the paycheck. And it's not even just necessarily about the sport, that you're really using it to continue to develop yourself as well. And I think that speaks a lot about you and your mindset. And to anyone listening who is trying to decide where to rodeo, I mean, if you want to determine it based on the type of coach that you're competing for, I think that says a lot about you. And same for what you just talked about. So you mentioned that you were also a player at Sul Ross, correct? So did you always play sports growing up?
I did.
Okay, so what else sports did you play?
I played football, basketball, run track, cross country, golf. I came from a really small school, so kind of did everything. And so I think those kind of sports kind of helped shape me to do what I need to do here. And so I've been really blessed to be here at Sul Ross and love it. And my coach gave me an opportunity. I played in a playoff game up here at actually Grace Pierce at that time. We didn't have the Geico Center, so they recruited me from there, and then the rest is kind of history. Okay.
Did you always want to compete in collegiate sports?
I didn't. Actually, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I came out kind of like a lot of high school kids, is that you just don't know what you want to do. But it was an opportunity. I took it and grabbed it with both hands and took off with it. And thank God I did, but no telling where I would be if I didn't. But I just knew I wanted to be around sports all my life just because I loved it. I actually wanted to be a trainer, athletic trainer.
Okay.
And then being here, playing, I couldn't get my hours in. And so the next thing I could do was coach. And so I started having my career that way.
Yeah. We actually did an episode with the athletic trainers talking about their interactions with the athletes and how much they feel like injuries play into the athletes' mindsets and motivations towards their competition and stuff. So
it's big. Yeah. They do a really good job for us and keep them safe from us, because sometimes we think about just winning and that kind of stuff. And so they kind of help prevent some things from happening. So they're really big for us.
Yeah. So do you still consider yourself a competitor?
Oh, yeah, by far. Yeah, there's no doubt. If I play with the girls or we're doing anything, I'm like, I want to win. I don't go there and just have fun. There's nothing I do that's, I think that's just my mentality. And then that's what makes, you have to have that mentality for you to be successful. Because if you're just out there just having fun, then it's different. You got to have a different mentality.
Do you still play pickup games, city league games?
I'll play it with the guys out there, or the girls, basketball, and every once in a while, and then I'll get out with the court with my girls playing volleyball when we get done with practice.
Okay. So in college you played basketball. Did you play any other sport when you were in college?
No, just basketball.
Okay. Was that in your intention, like, I'm diehard, I want to play basketball?
No, I actually wanted to play football, but I played 6-man, so I didn't like 11-man when I came here. And so so I kind of had to change my dynamic. And basketball is pretty universal, so I was able to jump over and play.
So, again, kind of the focus of this podcast is really about the mindset. So how do you change your mindset of going from football to basketball? What's the approach there?
Yeah, I kind of just thought that it would be tough. Because playing 6-man, it was just a different game, and then basketball was a game that I played forever and kind of knew, and I was pretty decent. I wasn't like a great player, but so I think it was an easy transition for me to come to college and stuff. The expectations of college is totally different than what was high school, and that was the adjustment period that I had to deal with. Was really hard. Was just how much time and effort it took to be successful in college, and also the dynamic of actually education too, and going to school and doing all that stuff too. So it was a learning curve first, for sure.
So is that something that you take into your current coaching now, helping as you bring players in, talking to them about that balance between being a scholar and being an athlete?
Yeah, so we talk mainly about the recruiting piece of it. So when we recruit, and we talked about the dynamics of you being and that's a piece that what's hard for the high school kids, that they're studs at where they're at. They're probably one of the best 1 or 2 players where they're at on their team. I have 23 of them, on my team. And so that dynamic is really hard for them, and understanding that they have to sacrifice and do extra. They already think that they're good. Well, they're good for high school, and they're not there at where they need to be at college. And so there's so many things that have to happen for them to be successful in the collegiate level, and to be separating from the average person.
Yeah. Do you see the same thing with your athletes that you're bringing in, CJ?
Yeah, everybody that we try to bring in has been really successful on the high school level. And the first thing we tell them that talent alone is not going to win on the collegiate level. You've got to outwork people, because when they make the jump to the collegiate level, pretty much everybody that made that jump has has a lot of talent. And then what starts to differentiate them is how much they're willing to work and how much they're willing to sacrifice to get to the next level. And some of them make that jump really quick. Some of them it takes a while. Some of them never make that jump just because they're not willing to make that commitment. So that's the biggest thing I see is, like you said, everybody at high school was the star at their high school or the star at their sport when they competed at that level. And when they make that the jump to the next level, it gets more difficult. And then to make the jump to the next level is a lot more difficult because not only does the talent level raise, but the work ethic also, I mean, that level goes through the roof at the professional level.
So what's the best piece of advice that you can give coaches to someone wanting to make that transition from high school athlete to collegiate athlete to help them be successful? What's the best piece of advice you could give them?
Be humble and work hard. You've got to work hard, and not just, I tell my students that your work ethic carries over into everything you do. So a lot of my best competitors are also the students that have the highest grades, because you can't just turn it on in one area and turn it off in another area. If you've got a strong work ethic, you're going to get good grades. You're going to be a competitor in the arena. You're going to be successful. If you have a poor work ethic, it carries over to your grades. It carries over to everything you do. So that's one of the things that we really look for is somebody that's willing to put all the distractions aside and actually just go to work on what they need to do, whether it's in the classroom or in the arena.
I think that a lot of it too is come in with an open mind. Not that they weren't successful where they were at, but they have to have open mind to coaching and to learning and sacrificing things and different opinions, because like I tell people all the time, I can't coach you the way that your coach taught you because I'm not that coach, and so they have to be open to what we're trying to get them to do and understand that I have to sacrifice things for us to be able to be successful as far as a team and an individual. But I think he's right. The work ethic is a piece of it that they got to have it, and if not, they won't be here very long, or they won't be very successful.
Yeah. So just to backtrack a little bit, CJ, did you grow up playing sports?
I did. It's a pretty sad story. We lost the state championship game my senior year in football and basketball.
Oh.
Jake Plummer was the starting quarterback of the team that beat us in football. And then in basketball, it was pretty crazy. Chris Baum, who's the head men's basketball coach at Odessa College, was the Gatorade Player of the Year in Idaho, and we lost that game as well. So. Oh gosh. But yeah, played high school football and basketball. I ran track 1 year. It kind of interfered with high school rodeo, and then obviously competed in high school rodeo all through high school. Went to the high school national finals, and then went to college on a rodeo scholarship. My first 2 years I went up in Idaho, and then I transferred to New Mexico State and finished up there.
And just rodeo in college? Any other sports?
Just rodeoed in college. Okay.
So you did something that a lot of rodeo athletes don't do, in that you kept competing in traditional sports while you rodeoed, and nowadays I feel like it's getting harder and harder for young students to do, or young athletes to do, and you probably see it even in just competing in more than one sport. So how were you able to balance traditional sports and rodeo?
There's a lot of times where rodeo kind of took the back burner, because where I was part of the team in football and basketball, we kind of made the decision that the team comes first, and high school rodeo was an individual sport. So there were times where I didn't get to go to a high school rodeo because I had a football game or had a basketball game and stuff. But we made it work, and it worked out well. My senior year, the rodeo schedule worked out really well, so I didn't have to miss any my senior year. Okay. So that was pretty fortunate.
But you were willing to make those sacrifices.
Yeah. I think the dynamic too nowadays is that they're specializing a lot earlier than they have ever been before. And I don't know if Coach has seen this, CJ has seen this, but like we have kids come in with injuries that have been happening since they were younger, because they are specializing, so they're not the full athlete. I think with us playing multiple sports, I think you have a different dynamic, use different muscles, you learn how your body moves and works, and what you can do, push your body, and how you can't push your body. And when you specialize, your body only performs in one area, and then so we've come to find, like lately in the last couple of years, that we have a lot of kids that have previous injuries coming into our college, instead of being all around. And I think that not only that piece of it too, like you learn so much from football because you got to be tough, and you got, coaches are usually tough. For basketball, you got to be finesse because you have to learn how your body works and everything. Track, you got to be fast, and so when you have these kids that come in and they're just specialized, they don't have all those weapons in their toolbox, and so then it hurts them when they get here.
Oh, you tapped into something that I could be on a soapbox for an hour about the specialization. And it's probably one of my biggest regrets as a parent, that I let my son stop competing in traditional sports at an earlier age than I wish I would have, because I saw firsthand how poorly he developed skill-wise in some areas. He was very successful as a rodeo athlete, but there were some basic athletic skills that he could not perform that I feel like would have had enhanced his performance even further. So you talked about the specialization, and you talked about, like starting to specialize in one sport earlier and earlier. So you two as young adults, when you were competing in sports, how influential were your parents? How much role did they play? Did they push you? Like, were they overbearing coaches? Were they like really involved?
No, they were. They were supportive. They pushed us like to be the best we could. Like me, they pushed me to be the best I could, and kept me on the right track. But they never were like overbearing. Like they were very supportive. They wanted me to be successful. But I don't think it was overbearing. I don't think they made me do anything that I didn't want to do. But if I did, I better do it 100% and sacrifice everything I needed to do for the team. I was the same way. I play a lot of individual sports, ran track and everything else, and we came to the understanding that if there's a team, if a basketball game came on or something like that, then my team came first, and so we sacrificed that time. But I don't think it was overbearing, and they pretty much let us decide what we wanted me to do. So
my parents, I never felt pressured, but it was the same thing that if I was going to do something, they wanted me to be all in on it. Mm-hmm. They would support me. I can still remember my dad used to tell me that he would work as hard as I was willing to work at something, but he wouldn't work harder at it for me. And that always rung with me that, if I was willing to go and I was putting a lot of effort into something, he would be right there with me, supporting me, helping me, but he wasn't going to do more than I was to try to help me at that. He would, and I think that's something that I carry over with my athletes now is I can't want it more than they want it for themselves. So, that's something that I think I was really fortunate. And then I had some really great coaches in high school. I still keep in touch with several of my high school coaches. I bet I talk to them at least once a month and have ever since I graduated from high school.
Yeah, me too.
That's
the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing, because I had a coach that believed in me, and I had coaches that were really hard and kind of did it. Then what we see a lot of times that they don't see their full potential because they may be pushing, they may thinking the tough love, but like I had a coach that never even like he just had expectations, and because of that, that's what I wanted to push to my kids now, and that's why I coach now, because of my coach.
Yeah.
Same thing. My high school football coach, when I was in high school, told me that I needed to be a coach, and I used to just laugh at him and told him, yeah, whatever. Yeah. And now he laughs at me, and he's like, I knew back when you were 18 years old that's what you needed to be doing. So,
wow.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Do you know what it was that he saw in you that made you?
I have no idea, and I've never had that conversation with him. I need to visit with him sometime about that.
That'd be a great conversation. Yeah, I'd love to be a fly on the wall on that one.
Yeah, mine's the same way. I think too. I think it's just like if you look at both of our demeanors and what we want. We have high expectations of ourselves, and I think we expect that of our kids. And I think I've had that for a long time, and I'm sure Coach did too. It's just. And we have a good work ethic, and that's what my coach told me. Is like he just knew I had high expectations and I had good work ethic, and that's all we want our kids to do too.
I know that's one of the first in our first team meeting. That's one of the first things we go over with my team. I hardly have any team rules, but I have expectations I give them, and I give them expectations of what I expect of them in the community, what I expect of them as a student, what I expect of them as a team member, and what I expect of them as a person. And what I tell them is, I was like, this is your roadmap. If I asked you to get to New York City and I give you a Visa card and said, you got as much money as you need to get there, but you can't use your phone, can't use a map, and you got to leave from Alpine, Texas, how soon can you get there? So these expectations, if you follow these and you meet these expectations, you're going to get to where you want to go a lot quicker. You're going to eventually can get there going the other route, and it's going to be a lot of wrong roads, wrong turns and stuff, but these expectations will help you get to where you want to go a lot quicker if you do them.
That's a good analogy.
You can choose to not do them, and you're gonna get sidetracked, and you're gonna run into some roadblocks and stuff. But I think that the expectations are one of the biggest things in coaching, and especially if you've got kids that are willing to meet those expectations. And I think coaches he's built a really good culture, and I know that's what I try to do. Is I've got a lot of really good students that they'll hold themselves accountable to those, and they'll hold those around them accountable. And when you start getting that, it makes our job as coaches a lot easier, because they're gonna basically start policing each other, and we don't have to, because we don't do that here, and makes our job a lot easier.
Yes, I agree.
So are y'all able to see in your athletes what your coaches saw in you? Do you see any kids now that you're like, oh, you should be a coach?
Yes.
I've got 2 or 3 that I'd love to hire as coaches, because they've just, it's hard to say what it is, and I've got several of them with different strengths and different qualities, but I've got 2 or 3 kids that'll be outstanding coaches when they get the opportunity to be coaches.
Just that it factor, right?
Just that it factor. They communicate well. They have the ability to reach a lot of students in different ways, and I think that's one of the things that I know I see going back to basketball officials is there's a lot of coaches that coach one style. Like Coach said, he's got 23 different kids. I've got over 40. There's probably 30 or 40 different ways I've got to communicate with those kids, because some of them, if there's some guys I can get after, and I mean I can get after them, and they're going to take it well, they're going to change. If I do that same thing to other people, they might start crying, and then they're done for the day. So you have to know how to communicate with every student differently to get them to reach or get them to do what you need them to do or what you're asking them to do. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges that I struggled as when I first started coaching. Was I tried to coach just one way, and then then you start to realize, hey, I've got to do this a lot of different ways to reach all these different kids. When you start doing that, it takes a lot more time, but I think you become a lot better coach.
Yeah, I agree. I think I have a bunch of kids that a lot of my kids come back in GA for me that played for me and stuff, because they have that it factor, and it's just they have expectations themselves is the biggest thing, and they hold themselves accountable. And I think as a coach, that's probably all you have to, because you're responsible for so many people and so many things that you have to hold yourself accountable. So I think that's part of the it factor. But yeah, we have a bunch of kids that are the same way. But he's right. Early in my career, I was the same way. I just coached one way, and then you kind of realize that you have to find different ways, especially with this new generation. This new generation is totally different than what we grew up on. It was like, we had the tough love, the real tough love. It was like you do it, or or something else happened. And you can't do that these days. And so you got to find different ways to communicate and get them to perform the way you want to perform.
Yeah, I've heard some horror stories about coaches who are like, used to coaching the old school way, and again with today's times and the changes that have happened in society, that it just doesn't work and it's not taken the same way. And it seems like coaches' jobs are on the line a lot easier, and anything can be recorded on a phone, and anything can be said. And I feel like, do you feel nervous about things that you do as coaches? Do you worry about, like, am I pushing them too far? Am I saying the wrong thing? Especially coaching students of the opposite gender. Do you worry about that? Anything along those lines?
I don't. I mean, I don't know how coach feels, but I don't. I just feel like, because my intentions are to get the best out of them and make them the best they can be, not only just on the court or on the field but in the classroom, and being humans too, because they got to understand, like, there's consequences to everything they do, good or bad. If you do something good, you're going to get some good rewards. If you do something bad, there are going to be negative consequences. So I don't worry about it, because if I had cruel intentions, like I was just trying to be mean to a kid or be ugly with them, then that would bother me. But in my heart, I know that I'm trying to just make them the best they can be. And so sometimes people, that's interpreted differently. Even with the kids that I have now, like sometimes they feel like I'm on them, I'm getting mad at them, but it's like they don't understand. They don't see what we see. They don't see their potential. And that's our job, is to make them see what we see in them.
Yeah, see them the way that you see them.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Anybody's welcome to come sit in my practices. I don't think there's anything to hide what we do at practice. I'm not a yeller. I'm not a screamer. I've seen coaches like that. My coaching style is I'll pull somebody off to the side and say, hey, this is what I think you need to do, or this is what you need to change. And I try to do it in more of a one-on-one setting instead of, I think I get a lot better a lot better reaction from the kids doing it that way than if you call them out in front of a group and stuff. Every now and then, that's probably still necessary, especially when what we're doing deals with livestock. And there's times I'll call them out if they're putting themselves where they can injure themselves or others or livestock. I'll call them out in front of the group there. But for the most part, coaching, I prefer to do it one-on-one as individuals and stuff. But same thing, everything we're doing, I tell the kids that my success now, I said I haven't scored a point in college rodeo since 1998, and I'll never score another point in college rodeo. So my success now is based on your success. If I'm successful, that means you're successful. So you've got to understand that for me to be successful, I have to find a way for you to be successful, and that's what I'm trying to do. And just because you don't always agree with what I'm doing or how I'm doing it doesn't mean that I'm not trying to make you successful.
And it always comes from the place of best intentions. Yeah. So I want to backtrack just a minute, because we kind of started talking about parents a minute ago and what your parents were like. What is it like today? We talked about the differences in students just now, like that it's a little bit different today. You have to coach differently. So what are the parents of today like compared to parents of years ago?
I guess I can do it two ways. So one of the things I think here in college, we don't have to deal with them very often just because they're adults and there's a lot of things that have to happen. So we don't deal with them a lot as far as that goes. I can talk a little bit more about the high school kid. You know, I coached high school for a long period of time, and I think the dynamic with the parents nowadays is that they're called helicopter parents, right? Because they're like always hovering on top of them and everything else. And I think that's good sometimes because they want the best for their kids too, but sometimes they don't let them fail. And so when they fail, they don't know how to react to it. And then their parents don't know how to react to it. So the parents' first thing that they want to do is go fight for them instead of just letting them fail. And there's nothing wrong with failing. It's just that's where we learn, and that's how we got to get better, and that's how we move on and mature. And sometimes I think when we get kids that come in here, you can tell the ones that parents are kind of holding them back or kind of coddling them a little bit compared to the ones that just let them go and not freedom, but like understand that they fail, they don't do well, they're not the best people, they're still working. And so those are the kids that usually are a little bit more successful in this level.
Yeah, I think we've actually progressed from helicopter parents to what they call now lawnmower parents, that they're just mowing down every obstacle that the kids might face.
Yes.
But to follow up on what you said, I saw a quote from Venus Williams the other day that she was like, or Venus or Serena, I can't remember which one it was, and she was like, I really hate to lose and I really hate to fail, but she was like, I can tell you for sure that I've definitely learned more from every failure than from any win that I've ever had, and I've won some really big things in life, but I've definitely never learned as much from that as I have from my failure. So I think you're right on that, you know, the parents need to step back and let the kids fail and have to figure it out for themselves a little bit.
Because I have my Annika plays for me. My son's here playing basketball at Soros.
And Annika's your daughter, just so that everybody listeners know.
Annika's my daughter, and then I have a kid that's in a junior in high school, and you know, as a parent, that's what we want to do. We want to protect them and everything, but sometimes you gotta let them understand that they have to fail, and they gotta figure it out on their own, because one day we're not going to be here, and then, you know, as a parent, they need to be able to function, and so they have to do that stuff.
Well, and it seems like the parents now, because like you said about the specialization at an earlier age, it's like the rings at T-ball stage and the, we're traveling to world championships in 8th grade, and we're flying across the country to go to a tournament, those things didn't happen years ago. And so there's much higher level of competition and much more opportunity to specialize at an earlier age, and much more opportunity for the parents to be involved than when it was such a team sport like you talked about. So what advice would you have for parents aside from, being able to step back? How would you advise parents to best support their kids as they, approach high school and wanting to become a collegiate athlete?
I think the biggest thing is just support them and be their parent and be their supporter. They don't have to be their everything in their, to shelter them or, get rid of all the obstacles that they need to get rid of. They need to figure it out on their own. I mean, we're there to guide them as parents, as coaches too. Like, I think I tell my kids I'm an extension of their parents, because I wanted them to develop as a young woman and develop into a great person and have all these characteristics that will be them successful when they get out of Soros. And so I think we do that really, really well. But I don't think as a parent, the social media part of it has changed the dynamic of individualizing And that's where it came back, because they see all these kids doing these things and they think they have to do it. And it's okay to be an individual and do it your own way. They don't follow the norm or what you think the norm is, because really the norm is not really normal. So the social media part of it, like you see these kids going to those tournaments and everything else, just it doesn't make you a bad player if you don't do those things. And so I just think that you don't have to follow in somebody else's footsteps. Just do what's best for your kid, and if it's playing, and it's playing at college level, it's playing at the high school levels, and if it's not playing at the high school level or college level, that's okay too. There's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah.
Our sport's a lot different.
Well, I was going to say, he said something that I think you probably will tap into, that in rodeo, there's no, especially at a younger level, there's no coach, right? The parent is the coach.
There's no coach. The parent's the coach. And then it's individualized. So if I go out there and I'm not, he could have a weak player on his court out there in volleyball, or put a weak player out on the softball team, and he could have a great team around him and they can cover up for the weaknesses of that player. If I stick somebody that's not ready to ride a bull on a bull, everybody's going to know when they pop the gate that he's not ready to ride a bull.
Less than 8 seconds, yeah.
So our sports is a lot different, because if they're not at the level they want to be at, they can't hide it. Because when you go out and compete, everybody gets the same opportunity to compete. I've got 42 kids on the team this year, and when we go to a college rodeo, all 42 of them get to enter. Only 10 of them count for my points team. But all the other kids, even if they're not ready, they still get to compete, and they can't argue with their results. That's what I tell them, is the results don't lie.
Well, and they still represent our university, but you have no control over them, because they're autonomous.
Yep.
So they can enter under the Sil Ross umbrella, but you didn't pick them for the team. But when people see them compete, they don't know which ones are for the team and which ones aren't, which ones count for our points and which ones don't. So any other school or onlooker, fan, spectator doesn't know the difference.
Yeah.
Yeah. So going back to the parents, getting them ready to compete, what advice do you have? Because again, it is different. The parent is the coach. So the parent.
I think it goes back to the conversation we were having a little bit earlier. I want students that competed in other sports in high school, because most of them, when they were raised, they were like in high school rodeo, it was all about them. Parents were the coach. They hauled them to the rodeos. Everything was about them. And when they get to college, if they didn't play team sports, when they get to college and practice is geared to a team setting, they struggle, because they want it to all be about them. I've got several people on the team right now that they wear you out at practice, because they want it to be all about them, instead of, I want it to be for the good of the team. There's a lot of days we're practicing for the good of the team, and they think that it needs to be all about them that day, and they really struggle with that. And I would rather see kids participate in football, basketball, track, do these other sports, so that when they get to the collegiate level, one, they're a lot broader, but I think it makes them a lot more coachable if they've competed in other sports. Because if you competed in football and you had a hard coach, or an old school coach, and he was pretty hard on you, and then you competed in basketball and you had a guy that was a technique orientated coach, and then you competed in track and you had a coach that was a disciplinarian, when you get to college, you can kind of blend all of those, and you adapt a lot better to being coached, because you've had all these different coaching styles when you were in high school, versus most of the students that I see that specialized had their parents coaching them, and it was all about them, so they struggle on a team setting.
Yeah. I hope y'all will go back and listen to the other episodes then with the athletes talking, and listen to what they have to say about what motivated them to compete at the collegiate level, because the answers are really unique, and it's very interesting that you can tell the difference about, even if you didn't know which athlete answered the question, you'll be able to tell which ones are the collegiate athletes versus the rodeo athletes, and it's really interesting what motivates them. So I brought you two in, and I thought you were an interesting pairing, because Coach Canaba, you're in a really unique position that you coach 2 collegiate sports, and that doesn't happen at the college level very often, that someone can coach 2 sports, and then you're coaching females as a male. And I know that essentially that's what it's like to be a rodeo coach, right? You're coaching 7 or 9 different, 10. You're coaching 10 different, completely different sports, essentially. It's not even like just different positions on the football team. I was trying to decide if I was really saying it correctly and thinking of it correctly, but really, because they're not a team working for one win. I mean, they are, but not in the same way, right? And so then you are in that unique position that you're coaching two sports and trying to balance it. So I know that I'm doing yoga for some of your athletes right now, and I'm listening to them about what parts of the season that they're in right now and when they see you and what they are allowed to do with you during off season and in season. And so how do you balance, and how do you keep it in your mind which sport you're in, and how do you keep it straight, and how do you, like, the rigor of that must just be huge.
Yeah, it's crazy, and then then you add the dynamic of assistant athletic director. So I'm working with Amanda now,
That's
so we're added that. So that third piece has a kind of we a lot of time management. That's what it comes down to. But that's a piece where it becomes where we recruit kids that do a lot of stuff on their own, and that's something that we talk about at the very beginning. That there's expectations. There's times that I can work with them. There's times that I can't work with them, and they understand that. And so during the times I can't, they have to do a lot of stuff on their own, and so they have to be really disciplined and really focused and understand that there's any result of it, and so they have to do a lot of that stuff on their own. And then my two sports are pretty similar, kind of like Coach was talking about. Like they're we call it black and white because there's numbers, and then there's you can't lie about numbers. And so I like that piece about it too, because you can tell me you're the best player in the world, but if you don't have the numbers to show it, it doesn't really affect anything. So,
and just to remind the listeners, your two sports are
volleyball and softball.
There you go. Yeah.
And so they have the same kind of hitting percentages and errors, and there's a lot of stuff that kind of go into it. But I think the biggest piece of it is just I always just try to keep the team in mind and understanding that there's a goal at the end, and to really try to stay focused on the process. And right now, we're at the beginning of the fall for softball, and we're in the middle of the season in volleyball in the fall. And so, I think it gets crazy sometimes, but I have really good kids. I really discipline, and they do a lot of stuff on their own, which is good.
Well, yeah, I definitely want to compliment you, because I was talking to one of your senior players the other day, and the leadership that they exhibit, and the role that they take on to support the younger athletes and to make sure that they are being onboarded and brought in and learning kind of the team way of doing things is really impressive. And they take pride in that, and it's really important to them.
Well, it's like Coach CJ was talking about earlier, was that when they start patrolling themselves and holding each other accountable and having their expectations among themselves, then our job becomes really, really easy, because then we just come in and do the X's and O's and do some things like that. But when that's the upperclassmen hold my other underclassmen accountable for things, and they do a lot of learning. They do a lot of teaching for the younger ones. And so there's also too, like, there's things that they can teach them that I can't, because they're in it. They may know little quirks and things that can make them be a little bit more successful. So I think they have a big impact on what our program does.
It's really cool. Yeah, it's really cool to interact with them, to see, like, she was the one I was talking to. She was frustrated that she was like, I've never had to deal with these kind of issues. Like, they're bringing in, this group of freshmen this year is bringing in new issues that we've never had happen on the team before. So
right.
It's a great learning opportunity for her as well, in her development as a leader as
Sure.
well. So it's really neat to see that being passed down.
Can I ask you who it was? Was it Cameron?
Well, yeah, but I wasn't going to say it on
I knew it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but they're also really responsive too. That's the other thing that I think is really impressive in trying to balance their studies, like you mentioned earlier, CJ, about them being students and athletes, and you mentioned also, Coach Canaba, about them trying to balance it all. That they're really responsive, when practice times change or workout times change, and they are really communicative. They send out a message, and within 5 minutes, everybody's there. They drop whatever they're doing and they show up. Sure. And I think that speaks highly, because we're a D3 school, and it's just different at the D3 level than at some of the other levels.
Sure.
Yeah. So what's it like for you to coach so many different sports with so many different rules? I know y'all were talking about, you coach a sports officiating class, so you're all about the rules and the numbers and the X's and O's and where the lines are and the things that go along with it. But in your sport, it's a little bit different, but there's still so many rules and logistics and things that have to go into it.
A lot of it goes back to the expectations. If we lay out the expectations, they know what they can expect from me, and I know what I expect of them. And then we set up our practices. I actually use an app, InstaTeam, and we send out our practice schedule every day. Everybody knows what our practice schedule is, what time they need to be there, when they need to be there for their specific events. And then, like Coach said, I've been really lucky. Probably my most difficult year was my first year here. I had no team leaders. I didn't have a very big group, which made it nice, but I didn't have any really good leaders, and my best leaders were freshmen that year. And that was a really challenging year. And then after that, I've been really fortunate. I've had a lot of really good actually a lot of really great leaders on the team the last few years. And when you have team leaders and they, I send out our message for practice, and then they get after people and say, hey, we need to be there early, we need to do this, we need to have this ready to go, and they kind of take care of a lot of practice. I thought one of the neatest things, or one of the best testaments to the system and the students that we have in our program, last year when my dad passed away, I took off a week and basically put a bunch of my team captains in charge of practice, and they ran practice. I mean, you wouldn't have known the difference if I was there or if I wasn't there, because they all stepped up and just ran it just how it was supposed to be run and stuff, and did it on their own. And I thought that was a really great testament to how they've developed, how our system runs, and then how they've developed as leaders, that they can step in and fill in those roles when they need to, and they don't have to be asked or told to do that. But as far as going to each individual event, we schedule specific times for each event, and one of the most difficult things, I think, is going from, if we're going to breakaway rope or tie goats first in practice, and then we go to buck and bulls, there's a totally different shift in mentality there. And the best way I've heard it described is Brendan O'Reilly, who's a UFC fighter, who I've done a podcast with him. He said that, these guys need, like, the rough stock riders have to train like they're in a UFC fight, because if you mess up, it could literally cost you your life. So you have to have that mentality every time you go out there. You can't take a day off at practice when you're getting on bulls or when you're getting on horses. Where in the breakaway roping, goat tying, team roping, you can kind of take a day off and have a day where you just kind of go easy. So I tell my guys, hey, if you're not feeling good today, if you're not 100%, if you're not all in, I don't want you getting on, because you can't just kind of cruise through practice on those events. There's no half speed, there's no walkthroughs. It's all or nothing. So we have to have that. You have to really be watching for that. If somebody's a little bit sick, under the weather, or if you can just tell they're distracted by something, you have to say, hey, why don't you just sit out today, because it's not going to do you any good to get on today.
Yeah, that's amazing. So I know that you are probably what I would consider like the new breed of rodeo coach, in that you are a true coach. You're not just the leader, because a lot of schools, it's a club, it's not necessarily an organized sport. So I've seen, you showed me books that you're reading and things that you're doing, and you talked about how you take on your sports officiating role, that you're actually observing other coaches and learning from them. So what do you all do? Because you are so busy, you have so much going on. How do you keep yourselves inspired and motivated, and how do you continue to develop yourselves as coaches to keep, trying to make your programs better and also make yourselves better and want to stay in the fight?
I think it's a big part of it's the students. When you have students that are excited to be there and excited to learn and do better, it's exciting to go to practice every day. When you have students that are highly motivated and stuff, it challenges me to be better. On the flip side, when you have students that don't want to be there, boy, someday it's hard to get out there and go work with them, just because you kind of dread it. But I've been really fortunate, because the last few years I've had some students they compete at the highest level and stuff, so that makes it makes it exciting to go to practice every day, because 3 years ago Kai was here, he was ranked #1 in the world while he was here professionally. We've got Tristan, who's ranked #5 in the world right now. We've got Cole Franks, who's ranked #10 in the world. We've got, that would be the equivalent of having first-round NFL draft picks here on our rodeo team, and you don't get to see that type of talent every day. And we've been pretty blessed to have a lot of it here at one time. So, and I think a lot of that carries over, because, they see Tristan was here when Kai was here. Tristan saw what it took for Kai to get to that level. So Tristan worked to that level. Now Tristan is at that level or higher. And now we've got these underclassmen coming up, and they see Tristan at practice every day and know what it takes for him to be at that level. So the bar's been set. They know if you want to get to that level, this is how hard you're going to have to work. This is what you've got to do.
Yeah.
So it makes it easier for those. Same thing. Those guys are showing these underclassmen the roadmap of what it takes to be successful.
Yeah, they say you rise to the level of your competition. So
yeah, I think, like, for me, I love the challenge of every day. Like, every day, like, there's never been a day that I've gone to practice and it's the same thing, like, ever. because it's because you have people that don't feel good today, or they're not working hard today, and the challenge of me trying to get them to work to the potential that they need to be working at that time is a challenge. My volleyball team right now, we started off really, really well, and we kind of hit a slump, and so that's challenging to me to see like what's going on. Why is it not working right now? And I read a lot of books too. I look at a lot of coaches. I look at CJ for a lot of the way he handles people and the way that they do things. And all the successful coaches, you just do that. You try to pick what they do really well, and you try to put it into see if we can use it. But I think the challenge of every day is pretty neat because it's never the same. I've never had, not in the last 23 years I've been coaching, not one of my days has been exactly the same. And I think that keeps me motivated and going too as well.
Yeah.
I've been really fortunate. My bachelor's was in journalism, so no background in coaching. When I started coaching, they told me they would pay for my master's, so I went back and got my master's in coaching education from Ohio University. When I was doing that, my cohort had a bunch of different coaches from all across the country. I'm friends with baseball coach that coaches at West Point. I went and spent a week with Boise State football. I don't know, it's been about 10 years ago now. When Coach Peterson was there, Kellen Moore was actually their starting quarterback, and I got to go with them and watch their practices, watch their team meetings. Basically, I was just a fly on the wall for a week, and then in 2017, I went and spent a week with the U.S. Olympic wrestling team up in Colorado Springs just to see how they run their practices.
Purely for the coaching aspect?
Just for the coaching aspect. See how they do their mental toughness, see how they... just what they do to get their team ready to compete at that level. And so I've been really fortunate that I've got to be around, some of the best coaches, or, watch some of the best coaches. And then, like Coach Canaba, we've had some really good coaches through here. When I was at Odessa College, we had some really good coaches there as well. And just, every now and then, if you're struggling with something, you can call them up and say, hey, this is going on, what would you do?
Yeah.
And you can bounce ideas off of them. Or they can tell you, hey, this is what I've had to do. Or there's been times where I've come up and talked to these guys, hey, one of my kids is having a problem with this professor. Any advice? And stuff like that. It's just a great resource to have other coaches to work with and bounce ideas off of as well.
For sure. I grew up in a really unique neighborhood where we called it Coach's Row, and I grew up next door to the head baseball coach, the head football coach, the junior high athletic director, baseball coach. Like, there was literally 5 coaches on my street in my neighborhood, and I grew up with their kids. And so as kids, we formed our own sports teams. We had our own uniforms. We did everything. We were super competitive. And my parents were not coaches. And again, I call myself a fitletete, not an athlete. But I got to go to coaching school with them one summer, and I just distinctly remember that and how cool that was. And I, as growing up and going through the teacher education program, learned about coaching schools. So is that something that is still offered at the collegiate level? Do you still do that, Coach Canaba?
Sure, there's coaches schools for both my sports, or every sport that you can go to, but they have it in high school too as well. I spoke at a lot of those things, and that's the same thing too. It's just mainly like the be able to bounce things off of each other and see what things work, and
the networking.
The networking. The other piece of it, the games has changed. I don't know how much rodeo can change, but the game has changed. From when I started to now. So I think you have to be up with the times and know how to deal with these new things that are going on in our sport. But there's still a lot of that stuff still available for us to learn.
Yeah. Is there anything like that in rodeo?
Well, I've never, for rodeo, there's rodeo camps and schools, you know about those all across the country, but they're more individualized. I've actually gone back to the global coaching seminar there in Ohio twice.
Okay.
I went back once just to go. They have little sessions all day for 3 days. And then the second year I went, I actually was a presenter back there.
Oh, congrats.
And did it on developing mental toughness. But one of the things I think is, for me to get better as a coach, like you said earlier, rodeos, all the coaches a lot of the coaches I know were more of managers of programs and stuff. And I try to actually coach, and there's no place, for rodeo coaches to go learn. I've gone and sat in on some practices of some of the coaches I really like. Brett Frank's up in Clarendon. I really look up to him, think he does a great job up there, and there's a couple other coaches. But what I do is try to go to sports outside and think outside the box, because every coach has something to offer, something that I can learn from. And whether it's a golf coach, whether it's a volleyball coach, whether it's a football coach, there's something that I could probably take from their program that could make my program better. So I think that to get better as a coach, you've got to think outside the box and use what other coaches use their experience to your advantage as well.
Oh, absolutely. And that's definitely something I bragged about you to other parents when they were here for the college rodeo. I was talking about how you are a true coach, and you, again, are not just that cowboy or just that manager, that you are a true rodeo coach. And I think that that is something that is absolutely unique to Sul Ross. And again, to go back to our history of being the founders of collegiate rodeo, that we are bringing that back, and we are so fortunate to have you here. And I think that that is something that can definitely grow our program. And it sounds like you're doing the same thing, Coach Canaba, really being a student of the game and a student of coaching and trying to continually keep yourself motivated. And you brought up an aspect that you said you presented on, mental toughness. So what would be your advice on being mentally tougher?
Well, I think the biggest thing for a student to feel mentally tough is they have to know they're prepared for the situation. If I tell my kids, you can't do something at a rodeo that you've never done at practice before, or, you know, whether it may not be that you've gone out there and been 90 points, but you have to have put yourself in that situation where you have to ride the bull to win the national championship. You have to do this and you have to do it mentally in practice. And if you're not doing that, if you're not challenging yourself in practice, when you're challenged in a competition setting, it becomes a lot more difficult. I know the best contestants I have, when the pressure's on, they can deliver. And I know they can deliver in pressure situations, and they know they can deliver in pressure situations. And that's when you become mentally tough, is when you can handle those situations, when those situations aren't too big for you. And we try to make practices as competitive as we can, so that when they get to pressure situations, they can handle that pressure. It's not something that they've never seen or never felt before.
Yeah, when you take a shortcut and lie about how many times you rope the dummy or how much preparation you did, then when you go into that competition, in the back of your mind, you have that in your head of, I didn't really prepare for this.
How many free throws you shot and stuff like that. You know, guys, I can hit 100 in a row. Well, that's fine. Can you hit one when the game's on the line? Yeah. You know, you can hit 100 in a row with an empty gym, but I want to see somebody that can make it when you got to make that shot to win the game.
Yeah.
I'm going to open a can of worms for you. I don't think you may want to come back to it, but I think like with mine, as far as like the mental side of it, is that I coach girls, and so what you find with girls is that they lack confidence sometimes, and I think sometimes they kind of feel like they're not supposed to be able to do what they're supposed to be doing, or they have the ability to do that when they do. And the mental side of the girls, like I feel like more nowadays I'm building more confidence in the girls to be able to perform than I had ever before, because most of the time, you know, because they're in college and they're good athletes and they're probably top of the best. Well, they're in the top 5%, because right now 5% athletes get to play at the college level, D1, D2, D3, NAIA, JUCO. And so they are an elite athlete, but the part that gets us is that I have to keep instilling confidence in my women and my young girls, because for some reason right now, this generation just doesn't have it yet. They don't have that. So I think that's where I have to come in and kind of have to keep telling them, like, hey, you can do this. You've already trained for it. I already put you in that situation. Now just go do it. And so we really have to build a lot more confidence than I have ever had before.
And I think that's definitely a cultural difference. I know from moving from like the DFW area out here to far west Texas, that I saw that was something that took me a minute to get used to, that the females didn't speak up as much in class. They weren't the first ones to raise their hands. They weren't the ones volunteering to be the, demonstrator in class for activities and stuff. That it's a different culture here than in other areas of Texas or other parts of the country. So I can see that for sure. Do you think it's the same with rodeo athletes? Do you feel like the confidence in females is different than males?
It is. I was just, when you start saying that, I started going through some of my best competitors. Over the last couple of years, Timmy and Hadley, they're both very confident. That was never a problem with those two, but I've got some other girls that are just as capable of those, but they lack the confidence. And when he said that, I was just going through, a bunch of the girls on my team, and I was like, yeah, they if they had more confidence, they'd be a lot more competitive.
Is there any way that you could distinguish pretty quickly when you're recruiting or when you're getting ready to pick your 10 that are going to be the competitive 10 for your team? How do you decide, and like when you're picking your starting lineup, is there a way to tell who's mentally tougher, who's more prepared, who's more ready, not just skill-wise, but like on point mentally and like can handle the pressure? What's your, like, how do you decide? Is there anything that tips you off?
I like to go with my people that are competing a lot. Like Tristan right now, it's hard to bet against him. He's top 5 in the world. He's won over $70,000 in the last 30 days riding bulls. He doesn't think he can be bucked off right now. And lately it's proven true. So,
and that's the key thing that he just said. He doesn't think that he can be bucked off, and that's key.
Yeah. And then what I see is the kids that compete and aren't afraid to go compete are the ones that normally do better at the college level. If I've got somebody that looks really good in the practice pen, but they're afraid to go put their money up and enter someplace, whether it's a local jackpot, whether it's a little rodeo, up in Monahans or Fort Stockton, when they're afraid to go compete, that tells me that they don't have the confidence to go enter and see where they're at. Versus I've got guys like Tristan, he'll fly to California to get on one bull, and he knows he's got $2,000 in flights and stuff to go out there, and if he wins the rodeo, he can win $7,000 or $8,000. But he's like, shoot, that's a good bet for me, So then I've got others that they won't drive 5 miles away to go enter a jackpot here in town. So,
and I think mine, like as far as what I look at the kids that are not afraid to fail. Because they're going to fail, like even getting bucked off of bulls and stuff like that. Like our girls, they're going to fail. I want the ones that are willing to put themselves out there and fail. Like I rather a kid hit a ball out and going 100 miles an hour than one that's going to try to tip it or try and let the other team lose a game for us. We got to be aggressive and do those things. And so when I'm doing my team, that's kind of the same thing. We want the kids that are going to feel like confident that they're going to do it, and then if they don't, then they're okay with it too. But they got to put themselves out there to sacrifice for the team, and sometimes some people are not willing to do that yet. Not yet. They'll probably get there, but just at this point, they're not there yet.
So to kind of put it in basketball terms, where we started this conversation, you want the kid that wants the ball in their hands with the last 2 seconds to make the game-winning shot.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, to kind of bring this full circle, y'all talked about some key things that I really want to follow up, tag into and make sure that the listeners really heard. And if they didn't get it when we first talked about it, to go back and listen again, that some of the key skills that y'all mentioned were communication, work ethic, time management, confidence, mental toughness. And if you look at that list of skills, those are also the top soft skills that employers are looking for. And one of the things that you both talked about is that you're not just trying to develop proficient athletes and successful athletes, but they're also trying to develop better people for their lives, and for society, not just for, the actual team or the time that they're here at Sul Ross, but you want to have an impact on them for a lifetime. And that some coach at some point did that for you too. And so when you talk about these skills that are really important to you as coaches, these are also the same skills that employers are looking for. So we know that athletes have higher rates of getting jobs, they have higher salaries. So I think that when you are talking about developing your skills, I want to pat you on the back that you're doing great work, and that maybe you don't always realize that what you're doing is making them more employable and making them better employees and helping to boost up their earning potential when they graduate. But all of the things that you mentioned really are doing that. So I want to finish up with 2 questions. I want to know, what is your best piece of advice for someone wanting to be a collegiate athlete? I mean, I already asked you, kind of making that transition from high school to college, but if you were going to coach someone and they were going to come in and play for you, you talked about giving them the roadmap, you talked about having the confidence, but, if you could just be a world-class speaker and speak to the world about being the best athlete, what would you say?
You got to be willing to learn. You've got to throw your ego aside, and you've got to come in and be willing to learn and willing to work hard.
And I'm going to go sacrifice. There's a lot of stuff you got to sacrifice if you want to be a great athlete. It may be, getting off your phone, staying off of social media for 3 hours to go work, or it may be where you have to sacrifice, going out with friends to go eat or do whatever just to make sure you take care of your schoolwork. I think sacrifice is probably one of the biggest ones too.
Yeah. You mentioned phones and social media. I had my class this morning look at how many times they'd picked up their phone on average per day. Over 300 times.
Sure.
And we didn't even get to go down the social media rabbit hole, which I would have loved to dig into with y'all this morning. But my final question I want to ask you is, as coaches and as competitors, because it sounds like you both still have that competitive mindset, I want to know, do you hate to lose or do you love to win more? What drives you? Is it that you hate to lose or that you love to win?
I think I hate to lose, and I just feel like just as me, I think the competitive part of it is, and I think that's a challenge of it is not trying to lose, and putting people in a place to be successful. But I really think I love to win too, but I think the losing part of it is a piece that keeps me fired up to go. When you win all the time, and it's fun winning, don't get me wrong, but I think I learned so much more from the losses than the wins. And the wins, they always talk about, if you talk to anybody that's as a coach, it always says players win and coaches lose the games. And so I kind of feel like that's the way I learn and get better and keeps me motivated.
I'd go the opposite. I'd say I love to win because I've got 42 kids and a lot of them are entered in the same events, and only one kid's going to win that weekend. And some of my best success stories have nothing to do with what happened in the arena. So right. Some of the biggest wins I've had as a coach have been kids coming back to me 10, 15 years after they left the program and saying, hey, you made a difference. So I consider that a win, even though it's never going to show up in any stat or anything like that. I'd say those are some of the best things that I've had about coaching is the little wins, whether it's somebody having a really good day at practice, whether it's having somebody make a breakthrough and getting to the next level, whether it's Tristan making the NFR, little things like that. The wins are different for every student in our program, and I think that's one of the great things about being a coach. Some of the greatest wins. I had a student last year that she graduated, and her dad came and said, "I never thought you could get her through school." So I would say that's a pretty big win as well. And she's back for a graduate year this year as well, and she wants to be a coach. So
awesome.
Little wins like that, man, those are awesome. Those are really awesome. Those make that makes coaching worthwhile for me.
Yeah. Well, I love both those answers, and that's one of my all-time favorite questions to ask people is what drives you, what motivates you. So I'm really excited. Well, thank you both very much for joining me for Under the Brim on this episode. Is there any shout-out that you want to give to your teams, to your programs, any recruitment things, any promotions that you want to give real quick?
I just want to say, come support all of our kids because, we have really tremendous kids, and we have we're turning the page on all of our athletics, and our rodeo team, coach has done a great job, and just come out and support when you get a chance. Go watch these kids and support them because they do a lot of work for us, and we put a good product out there for Sos.
Yeah, I love the way that the students here support each other. It's unlike any other university that I've ever been to.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. Like when the basketball players and all the other sports come down to our college rodeo, our announcer, he does about 10 college rodeos a year, and like he says, he never sees that any other school he goes to. And then there's times where college basketball games and stuff, I have to kind of get after my guys to kind of keep it under control because
speaking of, there's a story that I was supposed to ask you about, like from one of your first seasons here, about you going to a thrift store and buying a suit and setting up your own ESPN desk.
They did.
Now tell me about this story. I almost forgot about that.
They went and they actually printed SRSU in the ESPN font, and they built them a little table, and they found an old VHS recorder at a thrift store here in town, and they went and brought sport jackets, and they had a microphone, and they would sit there at mid-court and basically talk trash the whole game to the officials, to the other team, to the other coach, but they acted like they were on SportsCenter doing it, and they would film themselves, and they had the little, I don't know what they had something where they could do the da-da-da, da-da-da,
the sound,
the ESPN highlight sound and stuff, but they had a blast doing it. And then here the last couple years, they sit at the ends of the court, and they switch at halftime, and the second half they normally go down and harass the other team's coach and stuff, and They make a difference, I think, in some of the games.
A competitor is a competitor, no matter what, right?
That's it.
Yeah,
that's hilarious.
They have a blast. We need to get them to go to some of the volleyball games.
Yeah, that's too funny. Oh my gosh, I love it.
It's a
the
true
creativity
story.
of our students.
That is a true story, though. Yeah. I was sat there and watched some. Pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Well, nowadays, I mean, how many years ago was that? Do you remember?
That was my first year, so that would have been 5 years ago.
Okay.
And some of I think Brandon Lansford and Nate are they were there, and they're the only two that I still have in the program that were here. Brandon's on his graduate degree, and Nate's finishing his bachelor's this year.
Okay.